panelists, and hello everybody at home or in your offices, wherever it is you're joining us from today. Welcome to 50 by 40's Global Engagement Summit, Voices for a Better Future of Food. 50 by 40 is gathering voices from around the world to collectively examine the challenges ahead and exchange ideas. As part of that, we now have some hands-on moments where you get to listen to experts, but also ask lots and lots of questions, possibly build your own professional skill set, and also share some of your own ideas about the outcomes that you would like to see or that you've committed to. Before we dive in, I just want to remind everyone of our code of conduct. 50 by 40 is committed to creating a welcoming environment that is inclusive, respectful, and safe for everyone. We have a few guiding principles for the day, which is engage and unite. So this is really your chance to make this your own summit experience. As we've seen in the toolkit sessions earlier today, it is really wonderful when you share your ideas. So please use the Slido tool, ask your questions, make your comments, because we would love to hear from you wherever you are in whatever context you are living in. Today and tomorrow, these toolkit sessions continue. So I will be back in a few moments. I'm going to hand this over to Jon Bockman, who is going to lead this next session. And I'm going to be back with some questions and answers that come from you. One last thing I want to remind everybody about is the conference app. We've had a couple of days together now. You've heard some really interesting voices. You've heard questions from around the world. I would encourage you to go to the Global Engagement Summit website and download that app so that you can connect with each other and continue those conversations that you'd otherwise be having in the hallways of an actual physical in-person meeting. We are going to move now into this next panel session. This is about the role of philanthroactivism. Jon Bockman is going to guide us through a conversation. He works with 50 by 40 on grants and funding and is an expert in this area. Part of the question that's being addressed here is how visionary philanthropists and frontline leaders can work together to solve the food system crisis. One of the questions that each of the people gathered here today is going to address is if we can create a global, open, collaborative platform that gathers stories and up-to-date data on world changers or change makers, what does that mean for philanthropy in 2021 and moving beyond? There is so much territory to cover here. So it is now already 1 o'clock Eastern time, 7 o'clock in Central European time. For the next 30 minutes, I'm going to pass this over to Jon, and then I'll return with some of the questions. Jon, I encourage you to introduce yourself and also welcome the other people on your panel, and thank you so much.
Thank you for the introduction. It's very, very thorough and very welcoming. And welcome to everyone else here on the call. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel on the role of philanthropy and activism moving forward in 2021. I'm really excited to be joined by such an esteemed group of colleagues here. We will introduce them a little bit more throughout the presentation, but briefly to start, we're joined by Jiwon Lee, Senior Officer of Global Projects at ICLEI, Ellen Derer, Director of Philanthropy at Mobius, Karl Burkart, Managing Director at One Earth, and I am Jon Bockman, and I am working with 50 by 40 on their granting platform, which we're going to talk about here today. So with that said, let's actually talk a little bit about the format for this panel. So I'm going to start off talking a little bit about 50 by 40 and then introduce the platform, the granting platform that 50 by 40 is currently using along with its partnership to advance and help support proposals. After that, we're going to hear from a partner who has some experience with a platform, and they're going to talk a little bit about their projects. Then we're going to hear from some funders and hear about their perspective on the role of philanthropy and activism moving forward and how they might be able to use the platform. And then I'll come back and wrap it up, and we can invite a few Q&A at the end. So with that said, now that we've laid out the land, let's go ahead and jump right in. So obviously, most of you know about 50 by 40 since you're here at this summit that's hosted by 50 by 40. But just in case you're a little unfamiliar, 50 by 40 is a coalition of organizations dedicated to cutting the global production and consumption of animal products by 50% by 2040. And they do this by bringing together partner organizations to work in unison in their respective efforts to do good in the world. Right now, this includes about 50 organizations that are working in all sorts of amazing ways to advance various social justice causes around the world. And they all also share a common goal to reduce global animal agriculture to get to that 50% reduction by 2040. Sometimes there are issues that are so widespread and so toxic that they affect almost everything in our life. And global animal agriculture, industrialized animal agriculture in particular, is a prime example of that type of issue. So 50 by 40 is working to bring together all these different voices who are working to help the world in so many different ways, to raise awareness, to raise discoverability of their efforts, and then also to centralize around a shared goal of reducing global animal agriculture. So the hope is that all these connections will allow all stakeholders to do more, faster, and better. Now, that's a good idea and all, but then the question becomes, how do you put that into practice? How do we put that into action? We often share goals in our work, but without the connection, without the collaboration between stakeholders, we're really not able to capitalize on the collective strength that we actually enjoy. So 50 by 40 asked itself how they could create a resource to leverage that collective strength of organizations who wish to improve the world and have that mutually shared goal of reducing really the number of animals used for food. And to that end, they have created a granting platform on We Changers. So this granting platform aims to bring together stakeholders in this area, including not only from the 50 by 40 partner network of organization, but also funders who value advocacy at the crossroads of a variety of different social justice issues. Now, again, these groups all work on different cause areas and in different ways. Some focus on health, some on the environment, some on diversity, equity, and inclusion, some on just transition, some on plant-based or cultivated meat, but they all share this belief that reduction in the use of animals for food is something that needs to happen to advance those goals. And by working together, we can achieve these all more quickly. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with, actually, I don't have screen sharing abilities now. So if you could go ahead and give me permission, Brett, in the back end, that would be most appreciated. But in just a moment, I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can see the platform itself while I talk about it. We're going to hear from some of the people that are involved and on the ground doing this important work in just a moment, as I spoke of earlier. But first, we thought it would be helpful to quickly show you the platform so you can visualize what we're talking about. Hopefully, I'll get that permission in just a moment here. But I'm going to go ahead and start talking about it until I do get that permission. Okay, it looks like I just got it. All right, very good, thank you. Okay, so this is the 50 by 40 granting platform. So 50 by 40, as I alluded to, has created this to provide a space for all of those great advocates to highlight their respective efforts and for funders to find projects and find organizations really that they didn't know about that speak to them. Right now, it is exclusive to 50 by 40 partners to ensure a certain level of quality and relevance. But this platform will help bring funding to these partner organizations. It will help unify efforts, increase communication between stakeholders, and ultimately enable them to advertise and promote each other's work. All of this will aid in discoverability and also help identify opportunities for collaboration. And that last point, I don't think we can really overstate the value of. The importance of collaboration is just so crucial, not only between the funders who find these proposals and decide to fund this important work, but between the partners as well. As you'll see in a moment, partners can review each other's basic proposal information, which helps them understand each other's work, and importantly, also recognize opportunities for alignment. So one partner might be working on a specific initiative in a specific country and think that they're working on it alone, but then they could find another group that happens to be working on the same issue, but from a completely different angle. So they might not have known about that group or even that type of advocacy. And this platform is something that can help raise that awareness, that can help groups and advocates discover each other's work. Additionally, the platform provides an opportunity to highlight collaborative efforts, because that is something that is addressed in the questions for the submission process. So it does inquire about collaborative efforts and then give groups an opportunity to showcase those collaborations. So that is something that is not only going to, first and foremost, help those groups efficiently accomplish their goals, but also that is particularly appealing to many funders who want to see more connection between different efforts. So without further ado, let's jump into this. I wanted to talk very briefly about a couple different features of the website before we get to the main feature, which is the proposal page you see before you. There are channels that you can communicate with each other very quickly and easily on this platform, so you can keep all conversations about these grants in one place. There's also groups where you can have essentially a collection of channels. You can have resources and things like that, all gathered around one central hub. So if you were to think of this 50 by 40 granting platform as the 50 by 40 granting platform building, channels would be an individual room in that building where you can go into a room and have a conversation with someone. Groups might be an entire floor where you could have all these different conversations linked in some way. There's also the opportunity to post events, where you could post events that you're hosting as an organization or just that you're attending. And this is, again, to help with the overall theme of discoverability. So how many of us have gone to an event and we're talking to someone a month later and we realized that person was at the event and we would have loved to network with them and we just didn't know, and so we didn't make that connection? Well, this is an opportunity for all the stakeholders in this given space to advertise either their own events or events that they're attending, with the hopes that that will link up more people. So really neat features. There's also a library with a lot of all the information you need to submit proposals to the platform. But without further delay, let's get into the proposals themselves. To submit the proposals, each one of these organizations needs to register on the platform, and that includes registering their organization as well as a personal profile. So as you can see here, this is a collection of cards for each of the organizations that are involved, that have either posted proposals or that are funders that are going to be reviewing proposals. Similarly, you can look at cards for the people that are involved with the organization, with any of these organizations, and contact them and have conversations as noted earlier. And there are degrees of, you can basically choose how public or private you want your information to be. You'll also notice there are some anonymous funder cards here. We do offer the ability for funders to be anonymous on the platform, but we'll talk about that a bit more in just a moment. So looking at this proposal page that you saw at the beginning, we have a long list of proposals. In fact, we have some 44 proposals submitted from 30 different organizations. So a lot of different great ideas to change the world and advocating for meat reduction here. Proposals can be filtered by a wide variety of criteria, including SDGs, the target geography, type of request. So if someone has a specific area they'd like to really make sure they're supporting, they can select it here, or they could select a certain SDG and so forth. So that's a little bit about the overall spread of proposals, but let's take a closer look at an individual one. So this is one that's submitted by Jiwon at ICLEI, and they were kind enough to allow us to showcase it here. So I'm going to do that right now. So this is a proposal card, which is basically going to contain all the information for proposals that are submitted, the organization that submitted it, a couple key pieces of information about the organization, the team member that submitted it, its status, whether or not it's received partial or full funding, the type of request, and then some other key kind of details. Now, all these details are viewable by all members, so that includes partners and funders. But what you'll notice is there's actually a bunch more information down here. And all this information, these long form answers to questions that are part of the submission process, are only viewable by funders, as well as the proposal document itself, the proposal budget itself, and supporting materials. Now, this is something we have implemented because we wanted to basically make sure that partners were comfortable sharing all the information that they had on a given project and that funders could still have access to all the information they need. So we've done a couple things on this platform to cater to funders. As I just noted, they can see all the information, whereas other users can only see some information. Funders can remain totally anonymous, as I mentioned earlier with those anonymous cards, so they can review proposals anonymously if they so desire. And they can also contact partners at any time, whereas partners cannot contact funders without first being contacted themselves. Again, this is with interest, basically trying to cater to funder interest here. We want to make sure that they're not going to be afraid that maybe they'll get a deluge of emails from different partner organizations soliciting things from them. We wanted it to be as convenient of a process for both funders and partners as possible. And the very last feature I'm going to show to you really quickly here is there is a follow option where you can follow a proposal. And what we hope this will do is basically give incentive to funders to fund proposals, because often funders want to see that there's some level of support for a proposal. So if there is a follower, or there's multiple followers, basically that would all be showing up here. And then the person who's viewing it could easily reach out to them and say, hey, I saw you were interested in this proposal. Maybe we can talk about funding and something like that. And then if they ever do want to contact the person who submitted the proposal, they could do so with this little envelope icon right here. So that is a brief look at the WeChangers grant platform that we've set up at 50 by 40. It's a quick snapshot of what 50 by 40 is doing to try and take philanthropy to the next level. But now that you have an idea about what this looks like visually, we thought it would be interesting to hear from someone who is using it. So with that, we'd like to introduce Jiwon Lee, who is Senior Officer of Global Projects at ICLEI. Jiwon, thank you so much for being here. And we would love it if you could just tell us a little bit about your important work and a bit about your experience using the platform.
Thanks a lot, John, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jiwon Lee from ICLEI World Secretariat, and I'm also the Principal Support of the ICLEI Global Food Program. I will be sharing my screen. I hope you are able to see my screen here. Okay. Yeah, so thanks a lot for having me. As you can see, I'm wearing two hats at our organization. I'm also working at the Global Projects team, which is a team that is really focused on the project acquisition and implementation of projects. And at the same time, I'm working in the ICLEI Global Food Program team. So by wearing those two hats, I'm very happy to be in this session, especially to share my experience with 50 by 40, which has been very pleasant. So yeah, I would like to, for the ones who don't know ICLEI so well, I would like to give a brief overview of our work, and especially on our food program, and then also share our experience of the work with 50 by 40. So just quickly about ICLEI, we're a global network of local and regional governments, and we have been in operation for about 30 years. And now we're working with about 1,750 local and regional governments, and we're in operation in more than 100 countries. As you can see, we are in operation around the globe, and I'm based in the Bonn office in Germany, but we do work very closely with all of our offices, and you can see that it also covers the geographical areas where the meat consumption has been increased in the last decades, and we have been collaborating also with them on different initiatives on the food systems to improve the food systems.
Jiwon, if I could really quick cut in, I apologize for interrupting, but you're not in the slideshow mode, so I don't know if you could go to slideshow so they see the full size slide. That would be super helpful.
Okay, because I have been in the slideshow mode on my computer, but so you're not seeing the full screen modes from your side?
Correct.
Okay, let me.
It did get a little bigger with enlarging that, though.
Okay, just I'm very sorry about this. Just give me 1 second.
I'm just going to buy us a little bit of time here and remind people that you can go to the Slido tool now already and start asking some of your questions because we will have time for a Q&A after this session. And it would be really great to hear voices from everywhere. So don't worry about what language you speak as your first language, whatever way you express yourself. We're going to try and figure out what it is that you need to know. And this is a really wonderful opportunity because what an incredible amount of knowledge we have around this table. Jiwon, I'm going to pass it back to you if you're ready. Do you still need a moment?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
can.
Then, Jon, I'm going to take this hot potato and put it back in your capable hands, and maybe we can move forward in the conversation and then come back.
Okay, I think I found the solution here.
Great.
Does this work better?
We are still seeing in the preview mode, but we do see the slides, so you can just go forward with it if you can make it as big as possible. I think it's okay to go forward with the slides on the side.
Okay.
Yeah,
apologies about that.
Right there.
That looks much better. Thank you.
Okay. Just moving forward, ICLEI is working on the 5 different pathways that are designed for creating systemic change for local governments to become more sustainable, which are low emission, nature-based, equitable, and people-centered, resilient, and circular development. And as everyone in this room would know, that food is an interconnected sector that would cut across all the different 5 pathways of ICLEI, as it is a very it's an integrated part of the urban systems. As you know, 70% of the food is consumed in cities, where a lot of them are being wasted. And we see that there is a lot of, that cities are increasingly becoming interested in working in the food systems. And that is why ICLEI has been working in the last decade in the food system and launched the ICLEI Rurav City Food Network, which has about 30 plus local and regional governments and in operation in 18 countries. The City Food Network cities are the cities that are also from Global South and Global North, who are some of them are advanced cities, some of them are the beginner cities in the food network, but the idea behind it is that we will provide peer-to-peer exchange opportunities and policy guidance and technical expertise to the cities to improve their work in food systems. And in addition, ICLEI is also very much actively involved in the European and the global processes around foods, contributing to, for instance, the UN Food System Summit, and also at COP26. And one of the initiatives that we're strongly contributing is the Glasgow Declaration, which is one of the proposals that we have submitted and Jon has shared with you. It's really about to bring the local governments actors at the COP26 to really call for national and local actions on food. There are 5 work streams that our ICLEI food program is working, which are food loss and waste, sustainable food procurement, climate-friendly foods, healthy foods, and healthy food access and CD region food systems. And here, those are the 3 areas, especially on the public food procurement, as well as climate-friendly food and healthy food access, where we see a strong synergies with 50 by 40's vision, because through those angles, we are already promoting plant-based diets, reduction of meat consumption and reduction, and there are multiple areas where we can use as an entry point to synergize our work with 50 by 40's vision. So this is our profile. I'm not sure how it is shown on the screen, but this is our profile. And and I would like to also share with you some of our experience with 50 by 40 and the We Changers platform with the latest funding round with 50 by 40. Yeah, we have to acknowledge the strong role that 50 by 40 played as a facilitator between partners and funders, because they have been proactively supporting us, not only informing us about these grant opportunities, but also in shaping the idea about the particular interest from the funders, the regions. So this has been a very instrumentally important for us to shape our ideas. So it was not that we would guess what kind of ideas would be interesting for the funders, but already supporting the support that we got was very extremely helpful to shape our ideas. And also the platform that they have developed was something very, that I could call it, that it functioned as an intersection between solicited and unsolicited opportunities, because by responding to the call for proposal, which is a solicited opportunity, we were able, this open door to unsolicited opportunities where we could be in touch with the funders, where we could be also potentially develop our ideas with the funders. So I think this is it's such a valuable platform for us, because usually many organizations actually have difficulties in meeting new funders, because you usually work with the usual suspects, but then these opportunities actually open doors for multiple funders who actually are interested in this work stream. And just really quickly touching upon the platform itself, I have to say I was very impressed, because it was very easy to use, not unlike the static platform that my team has been used to, where we had to input a lot of information, and then there's not so much, it was not interactive at all. But here it was very intuitive, it was very user friendly, it was interactive, and it was as if we're creating a social media profile of our proposal, and we were also trying to see how it could be appealing for the funders in a very interactive and fun way. And also this, Jon also showed earlier that it was that we were also able to see what other organizations are putting forward and how they're putting forward their ideas, and this actually increases the transparency of the use of the funding, or of how other organizations are working, which is usually very difficult to know if you're not having such platform. So it was also very interesting to see, and I think also in the future I could also imagine that we could team up with other potential organizations who have similar aspiration and us, and also in this case it opens door to more partnership also among the partners of 50 by 40. And I really value the thoughts that were put into to improve the time efficiency of the partners and the funders, because there was also an option to submit a 2-pager EOI, expression of interest, instead of a full proposal, which is really great, because there are many cases that we had to submit 30, 50, 70 pages proposal without knowing if the funder would be interested in this theme or not. So having first the 2-pager proposal, which will hopefully be developed, be co-designed with the funder to the extent to the full proposal, will be something that we hoped to reach. And this actually really made us feel that we're not losing time. It's actually really something very efficient. And it was also nice to see that that 50 by 40 encourages collaborative efforts. We do work a lot with different partners, but just having this in the system, that there will be incremental increase of the funding based on the number of partners, is something very interesting from our side to have, which promotes collaborative efforts. And as I mentioned earlier, we would like to expand our partnership through this platform. And Jon just showed so many different functions that I would like to also use in the future. So this is it from my side. Sorry, I'm very sorry for the technical problems, but I hope I was able to share some of the insights and experiences that I had in using this platform. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for that, Jiwon. That was just a very eloquent segment, and I really appreciate and hearing about your perspective and your experience, and of course all the great work that you did. I wish we had more time to talk about ICLEI right now, but we do have to continue moving forward. So now that you understand a little bit about the platform a little bit better, and maybe the side of the partners who might be submitting proposals, we thought it would be good to hear from some of the philanthropists who are engaging in collaborative work. So with that, we'd like to introduce Karl from One Earth and Alan from Mobius. Starting off, we will talk a little bit with Karl. So Karl Burkart is the managing director of One Earth, which is a philanthropic initiative dedicated to achieving the 1.5 Celsius goal with 3 pillars of action: renewable energy transition, nature conservation, and shifting food systems. Karl, welcome, and thank you for being here. We would love to hear an overview of One Earth's vision and some of your thoughts on philanthroactivism for the future.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks for having me here. We're very excited about what you guys are doing and the new platform. So yeah, I guess if I'm going to say 2 words, the 2 big words I could get across today, it's imperative, the word imperative, and the word specificity. And these are the things that we kind of found to be missing in talking to, especially this kind of next generation of high net worth individuals. Everyone wants to make a difference on climate change, and we're about to see a lot of capital coming in, but still kind of like a lack of clarity about how to move because it seems so overwhelming. So that's one of the things we really tackled. And I'll give you an example of why that's important on myself, which is I remember when Lhasa, and I was at Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation for many years running science and technology program there, and I talked to Lhasa about then the very beginning of this idea of 50 by 40, and I kind of was like, boy, that's awfully specific, and I didn't know if it felt like, do we really need to do that? Do we need, you know, and it turns out we do, and I'll talk about that in a second. But as a then someone managing a grant portfolio, I myself doubted that I needed to kind of dive into this additional space, because of course, as working on grant makers, we're exposed to all of these different topics and issues and projects everywhere. So which one is the most high priority, you know? So and it turns out, so I really did need to dive into that. And I'm going to talk about how that kind of morphed, this idea has morphed into One Earth. And I'll just share my screen here for a minute. There we go. So to start with the imperative part, just a recap of where we are right now. We are at 1.1 degrees Celsius in global average temperature rise, above early industrial levels. And as we saw 2020, we've had very extreme impacts from that level of warming, including rapidly accelerating ice in the poles and massive forest fires on pretty much every continent. And I think we like get caught up in I call them the fire and ice impacts. You know, they seem so dramatic. But the one that really is keeping me up at night is what I'd call like the more humble, the impacts on the earth itself. And I mean earth with a little e. And there was a recent paper that came out that looked at what was going to happen to arable land, the land that produces all of our food, under various degrees of warming. And at 1.5 C, we really start to accelerate the loss of arable land. And when you hear, and this is something we've heard from funders, well, isn't 2 C okay? Like, isn't 2 degrees Celsius all right? Well, no, it's really not. And what happens at 2 degrees Celsius, at least in this paper, I think it was Park et al., there's as much as, we could lose as much as 24% or nearly a quarter of our arable land under 2 degrees Celsius. And we can only can't even really imagine what happens to the world when we lose a quarter of our croplands and lands for agriculture. It boggles the mind what impacts that would result in. So that's really the genesis of One Earth. We realized we need to get a lot more clear and a lot more specific about what to do. And we know that philanthropy has historically gotten very little in climate philanthropy, less than 2% for environment and climate put together. And it's, you know, the greatest issue of our day. So really need to scale that. One of the ways we did that was by investing and funding a lot of scientific research as a philanthropy. And we got other funders together to help on that and arrived at a kind of more concise way of explaining what we need to do, especially useful for people kind of just coming into climate change who aren't climate wonks. So those are, we call them the 3 pillars of action, as Jon mentioned: shift to renewable energy by 2050, protecting 50% of lands and oceans, and 0 net emissions from the agriculture sector. So this is all backed by a big climate modeling effort that we supported, which has resulted in a big publication last year by Springer Nature called Achieving the Paris Climate Agreement Goals. And we heard it's now, I think, the most downloaded climate text. So it's getting cited a lot, which is great. And really what we wanted to do is can answer this question that a lot of funders were presenting to us, which is it too late to do 1.5 Celsius? And so we really want to look at it, the possibility of doing it with currently available technologies and practices. So no off in the distant futuristic technology. So we were able to prove that, yes, we can. The gold area there is land use or AFOLU emissions, which turn out to be incredibly critical in this. Of course, we have our rapid decline in emissions from energy, but we also have to rapidly decline for land use emissions to 0 or net 0. And this is just a modified version of the chart to show that as we recover from the COVID crisis, we're expecting what we call a second wave of emissions, which is that sort of gray wedge there. Could be something like 100 gigatons over the rapid decline identified that was necessary. That could be theoretically taken up by a very dramatic phase out of deforestation and land use emissions. So anyway, just quickly, I'll end up here, but to say, as we all know in this group and the people attending, tackling deforestation and ending it is one of the top things we have to do. And of course, we can't do that until we address those drivers. And as you know very well, at 50 by 40, a lot of the drivers of deforestation is feed for cattle. So there's a big industrial ag piece to this. The second part that is super wonky, and don't be scared, I'm not going to go into this, just to say in chapter 4 of the book, if anyone's interested, it's a free download. It's a 500-page book, but chapter 4 breaks down the non-energy emissions from CO2 to all the other gases. And what we found in the book, which aligned very much with Lasse's initial 50 by 40 provocation, is that, and this was totally not, this was a coincidence that the methane reduction in methane emissions required to do 1.5C is basically a 50% reduction by 2040. So Lasse and team nailed it on that one. We also need a serious reduction in nitrous oxide emissions, which is also very tied in. Most of these emissions, the pie charts on the right show the sources of those. So agriculture is the big piece of the pie there. I like to just end very simply, like when I talk to my friends about what we need to do in agriculture, aside from ending deforestation, for the non-CO2 gases, we have to reduce food waste by half, reduce chemical inputs by half, and reduce red meat by half. And this is a little cutout of the Eat Lancet Commission diet, which many of you are familiar with. It's a big scientific effort. It's a theoretical scenario of feeding 10 billion people and giving them nutrition. And it turns out we have to eat a lot less red meat. And in that scenario, although there are many vegetarians and it's different diets around the world, basically amounts to about 1 portion of red meat a week, which is what we're trying to do in our own house. So anyway, just to end, and I'm not going to go into much about on the specifics, we can talk about it later, but we realized we really, to bring all of this science into action, we needed a space for people to explore projects, and this, especially the new generation, and we coined this term philanthroactivism because really there's an activist sensibility about a lot of young funders, in particular the Gen X, Gen Y funders, want to make a really big impactful, big impact with their funding dollars, and their grandparents and parents probably spent a lot more capital on those big ivory tower institutions. And so one of the ways we're trying to democratize that is by really opening up a platform and showcasing projects through a geographical framework. So this explores by bioregion, which is the ecological sort of boundaries of different regions of the earth, and you can explore projects in the 3 pillars of the climate model that we showed. So we just launched that a couple months ago, and also found out about the platform you guys have, which is so exciting because each one of those little pieces needs it's own world of funders working on it. And the meat reduction piece in particular, I think, needs philanthropic capital because it's a type of funding, it's a type of thing that's hard to fund through another mechanism. So anyway, kudos to launching the platform, and I'll leave it at that and we can open up to questions later.
Great. Thank you so much for that thoughtful presentation, Karl, and for all of the great work that you're doing and the way you're thinking about things. It's really, I think, a great contribution to this conversation. And gosh, I wish this panel was twice as long because I would love to follow up with some questions of my own. But alas, we are nearing the end of the panel. We may go a couple minutes over, which I've been told is okay because this is the last panel of the day. So apologize if we do run a tiny bit over, but for right now, we're going to transition over to Alan Derer, who is Director of Philanthropy at Mobius, an organization that offers fantastic, thoughtful support for a wide range of initiatives, but I'm going to let him tell you about that. Alan, can you tell us a little bit about Mobius and the work you do, and then your experience with the platform and thoughts on how it could be useful?
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. Thank you, Jiwon and Karl, for those presentations. Just want to start with a quick shout out to all the 50 by 40 and other team members who are putting on this event. It takes a lot of work, so kudos to you all and thank you. So my name is Alan Derer. I'm Director of Philanthropy at Mobius, and I'll speak for a few minutes about Mobius, who we are, what our focus is, and some of our experiences with the 50 by 40 We Changers funding platform. So Mobius is a family office based in the San Francisco area. We take an integrated capital approach to looking at how to skillfully deploy capital to address the challenges that the world faces today. Of the many challenges in our world, we at Mobius focus specifically, primarily on addressing the harms and inequities of factory farming. The angle that we come at this is to reduce the vast amount of suffering that it causes for animals in the system. And we also very much believe in a Big 10 approach, which is what we find very appealing about the 50 by 40 work. We know we need to work with a diverse set of NGOs and other stakeholder groups if we want to make change. So the primary way that we engage is through philanthropic grant making to NGOs addressing factory farming through efforts such as farmed animal protection, meat reduction, and food technology to replace the need to raise and kill animals for food. The last quick note I'll mention about Mobius is that we take a multiple forms of capital approach where we try to look holistically at the different ways we're able to support NGOs and advocates in this space. So the financial piece certainly is present and is very important. But we think there are other ways that we can offer as well. And just one example of a project that I'll share is, for 4 years now, we've offered meditation retreats to those who work in the movement trying to address factory farming. So that's one of the ways that we try to support advocates in this space. I'll mention very briefly just a few of the areas that we are seeing opportunities in our own work and supporting organizations that we're quite excited about at the moment. The first is work with governments, especially in the US, where we've been engaged in the last few months. We are seeing opportunities to push forwards to make a change and use the lever of government, whether it's legislation, regulation, administrative actions, or trying to leverage government investment into new industries. International work is something that we're looking at and very interested in exploring. So my understanding is that only 2% of the world's farmed animals currently reside in the United States. And so if we want to really address this global system, we need to look at how to do more, specifically in China, Asia, and Latin America are some areas that I'm currently looking in. Third, institutional campaigns. So working with institutions to offer the right choices for individuals so that we don't need to persuade individuals to make the right choice when it comes to food, but rather creating that food environment where they have better choices. And the fourth area that we're excited about these days is the ability to leverage markets and food technology with plant-based and cultivated meats to replace the need to raise and kill animals for food overall. So lastly, I'll just briefly share a little bit about some of our experience as I've spent the last few weeks beginning to review the 44 proposals that Jon mentioned are in the We Changers funding platform, including ICLEI's proposals. So I'll just share a few of the specific aspects that I have personally found helpful through the offering of this platform. So the first is that, as I mentioned, our relationships at Mobius are primarily in the animal protection space and the veg advocacy space. And so having this platform, first and foremost, just opens us up to learning about opportunities that we otherwise would not have known about. And it's fantastic to learn about diverse organizations, health, environment, trade, faith-based, et cetera, doing work across the globe in many different parts of the region, which are very interesting for us to learn about. So just the exposure to new groups and new approaches, honestly, for me is, I would say, the main value add of the platform. I think the second thing that's really helpful is just the amount of time it would take to to research, identify, contact, and solicit proposals from all these different organizations would be a lot of time. And so there's just a huge time cost saving to be able to come to one place and have 44 proposals on meat reduction ready and waiting for me to review. And the third that I'm really excited about is the ability for the platform to foster collaboration across funders. It's a really easy platform to get into. The engagement there's a very low bar for engagement. Folks can join anonymously, as Jon said, or with a profile, and they can review and scan proposals without needing to make any funding commitment upfront. So just zooming out, I love the idea of this platform. I think conceptually it's fantastic, and I think it meets a need that exists. We're at a place, I think, where there's a growing number of well-respected global institutions who are taking a stand and speaking out about the need to do more and shift away from intense consumption of meat. But on our side, we're behind on creating a coordinated network and a way for health, environment, and animal protection funders and foundations to come together in a shared way and collaborate on addressing the problem. So I just want to end by sharing my gratitude for 50 by 40 and all of the partners for both cultivating the platform and the great work that you do with the coalition. Factory farming impacts so many movements and groups, and it's crucial we work together in a coordinated way. And I think this is an example of one way that we can do that. It's a joy to be doing this work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was a very, very thoughtful reflection on Mobius's great perspective and on your experience with the platform. I'm just absolutely delighted that it's provided such value, and I think we need to take down some talking points of what you just talked about, because those are such compelling arguments to engage with the platform. So I'm just going to take 1 minute here and wrap things up, and then we'll open it up for some questions. For those of you who have stuck around, we really appreciate you hanging out with us. So you've all got a quick look at the platform today as it stands. It's in its earliest iteration. This is the first funding round that we're using it. But we have ideas for the future on how we're going to make it even more useful to both partners and funders. So to start out with, right now, we're offering quarterly funding rounds, and the first 2 funding rounds were open to all sorts of proposals. But in the future, we plan to have targeted funding rounds where they centralize around a more specific effort or type of work to advocate for the reduction of animal products. And we think that'll increase the ability of groups to identify and discover each other's work and collaborate. So that's something that we're excited about in the future. We're going to continue trying to expand the reach of the platform and engage with new partners and new funders as well, of course, from different sectors, and try to continue to broaden the scope. And finally, last but certainly not least, we're going to be working to identify gaps in the methods that are being used to reduce global animal agriculture. So we're particularly excited about this effort as we really believe that attaining that 50% reduction in 2040 requires the consolidation of efforts, the collaboration between different areas, and making sure that we're working constructively together, not in our own silos. So by identifying gaps in the type of work that's being done in this issue, we can proactively reach out to groups and partners and people who are doing work in that type of area, try to bring them in to try and help them see how animal agriculture affects their area, assuming it does, and try and continue to just broaden the strength and appeal of the platform and 50 by 40's work. So look forward to that in the future, but for today, that is the end of our panel. We, again, really appreciate you all sticking with us and dealing with a little technical hiccups. Big props, as Alan said, to the team behind the scenes, holding everything together and making it all work. We really appreciate everything they're doing. And if we do have any questions, we do have a couple minutes, I think, that we're happy to address them.
We do have a couple of questions, but that was such a complete picture that we've been given already. And the questions are very diverse and different from each other, but we'll see how far we can get in these last couple of minutes. Thank you to everybody for sticking around, and Jon for helping guide us through all of that material, because we really had to take in a lot of information all at once. So that's why we have so many different questions. I'm going to start with a question from Arturo, who asks, what are the most common mistakes made by organizations, both big and small, when approaching fundraising? And if a panelist would just like to raise their hand or feel that they could lean into that one. Oh, maybe Jon, you look like you might be willing to lean in.
I'm happy to talk about it, but I also think I don't want to take the floor when we have two great funders on the call right now who might have more specific ideas on that front. But based on my experience, I think that we need to recognize who we're writing for, what the ultimate goal is of where we're submitting. We need to be where we're submitting requests for funding, be it a full proposal or an expression of interest or just regular communications. I think that there's a lot of kind of fragmented information out there about how to construct a proposal, for example. So one of the things I did as part of my work with 50 by 40 was I wrote out an article that's published on Medium about tips and tricks for writing strong grant proposals. So basically just making sure that you do your due diligence and really follow those formatting guidelines, really speak to the interests of the foundation or organization that you're appealing to. I would say those are really top level, something that's really important that I often see kind of maybe deprioritized, but I don't know if Karl or Alan have anything to add.
I think that you really did lean into something that Karl was speaking about, which was the specificity and imperative, and why those are the two important keywords. Karl, I'm going to definitely turn to you. There is a question specifically for you also as an extension of this. So if you want to address some of those mistakes, large and small, that are made, that would be amazing. We also have a direct question, which is, what do you say to other foundations to get them interested in land use and livestock? What would your elevator pitch be?
Well, yeah, anyway, Sarah, you totally stole my thunder. That's exactly what I was going to say. I would say those two words, imperative and specificity, because, even solicited proposals, 8 out of 10 lack both. And maybe one gets both and one or two get one of them. But it's really, to me, like the next generation of philanthropy, which we know climate philanthropy is going to scale. It's already scaling just from the Bezos announcement alone, not to mention a bunch of others. So what all of these new funders require is they want to know quite specifically what their money is going to go to. That doesn't mean you can't build in general support. But what I find is that my big comment, my word of advice would be make a very specific, compelling project and use that as a funnel or a gateway to later ask for larger general support rather than the other way around, which is 99 times out of 100 how it goes down. And on the elevator pitch, the interesting thing is that, we want to really work with 50 by 40 on this because I don't think actually we have a really great one yet. But what's interesting is it's been the barrage on livestock and land use has been coming this way rather than the other way around. So I myself, like I said, I don't think skeptical is not the right word because I knew that we needed to address livestock and these land use issues, but it was down on my priority list. So if it's down on my priority list, it's going to be down on a lot of other people's. And I personally felt like it's like it was too much for me to deal with. And so when LASA came around with the specificity of the target and I had to start researching it, it turns out that the imperative is we have to do it. This is not an option. Like 100% renewables is not an option. Saving the remaining natural lands is not an option. Maximizing carbon removal through reforestation and planting 1 trillion trees, it's not an option. These are all necessary things. All of them are needed to do 1.5C. So I think that would be my main statement I would make is like to get them amped up about the imperative of it. But on specifics, we're going to defer to you guys because you have already unlocking all these great proposals.
Thank you so much for that, Karl. We have time for one last question, and I'm going to direct it to Jiwon and Alan, but any panelist is welcome to participate in this. Joanna is asking, what kinds of changes have you seen in the past year in terms of funding activities, excuse me, especially in connection to COVID-19? And the platform there is listed incorrectly, but it is, I'd like to widen the question out to be any of the fundraising activities, excuse me. If I could just ask Jiwon to please lean in on that question, changes that you've seen in COVID-19 times.
Yes, sure. Thanks for the question. Yeah, from our experience, we were at the beginning of the COVID very concerned that actually many of the funding will be frozen for many of the NGOs because maybe many of them would go more on the economic development or release. So we were a bit nervous at the beginning, but then the longer COVID was lasting, the more green recovery calls were coming from nowadays. There's from the German government, from the European Commissions. So there is actually, people really see that the sustainability and the sustainability, climate change and biodiversity are all connected to the impact of COVID. So therefore, we're seeing actually a growing number of funding that is related to COVID, but now we're also trying to learn how to link it with the green recovery. So this is something that we're also in the learning process of it.
That's fascinating. So what you're seeing instead of what was very worried about 6 months ago was there's going to be no funding. It's going to be a terrible year. 2021 is going to be our hardest funding year. What you're saying is there's actually a great deal of opportunity because people's lives have been so deeply disrupted that the consideration of a green path forward is actually on people's minds and is starting to inspire the projects that you're seeing.
Yes, correct. And we have also done a quick assessment internally, and it doesn't look like all of the funding are only related to COVID, but more on on biodiversity, on climate change. It continues to be the funding channel through those aspects, but then just that it requires a lot of integration and embedment of green recovery of the countries.
Well, that's really interesting. I imagine that conversation will continue over the next day of this summit because I've heard that more than once, a sense of opportunity in COVID as opposed to simply an upending of our lives. Alan, I want to give you a chance. I saw that you were nodding there for a moment. Would you like to also add to this conversation at this point?
I agree with the comments here. I guess I just briefly added, like Jiwon, I think we were sort of at first waiting to see if funders would have a drop in their ability to give for a variety of reasons. Fortunately, although I don't really know, but fortunately I think that's not panning out from what I'm hearing from NGOs. I think maybe things are a little bit down, but not as like devastating as NGOs were worried about in the weeks and early months. And then I very much agree about the opportunities. I mean, I think we're seeing new coalitions emerge with all the media attention on slaughterhouse workers, for example, here in the United States with COVID. And I think it's always a good opportunity for events like COVID for funders and foundations to review their legacy grants and their theories of change and revisit to really make sure that, looking at where the world is today, is this where we want our philanthropy today to be?
Right.
And so I think that's what I'm seeing as well.
Right. And I like the idea that we all have an opportunity to reimagine, re-envision, to really rethink where we're at and where we want to go. Jon, you're absolutely right. We could spend the rest of the day talking about this. This is such an important aspect of the work that we've been talking about for the last 2 days. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for offering so much information in such a small amount of time. It was like the high energy shot, the teeny tiny, super concentrated energy shot that everybody needed. Thank you for all of your incredible insight and for all the information. I know I could kind of hear notes being made around the world. So thank you so much for being here with us today.